Sunday, 14 West 7th Street in Ybor City, the place where it all began, Chillin' Art Glass Gallery and CBD Emporium.
It's a CBD haberdashery.
It's at the haberdashery. It's time to jump into the rotation. That looks so semi-professional.
It's not professional at all. Stop! Don't.
Well, I am your political director of Suncoast Normal.
You're
Gary
trying
Stein.
to flatter me all morning, man. Trying to tell me my graphics are good and bring me bread and butter and coffee.
Did I say your graphics are good?
Yeah,
I must have missed that.
Yeah, it's semi-professional.
And this and this is our deputy director, Carlos. Don't call me Pedro Ermida. And from above the Beltway.
That's specific, Pedro.
That's specific, Pedro, yes. And from above the Beltway, our executive director, Chris Cano, who got some interesting news that came out of Congress this last week, where they came up with a report with a very interesting finding. What was it, Chris?
Well, the Congressional Research Service has put out a report that flatly says President lacks the constitutional authority to end cannabis prohibition by executive order.
Why the fuck?
Now,
that can't be true. That got to be Congress people trying to flex their dicks and shit.
Now, Normal has long argued that the president can set the tone for national political discussions surrounding marijuana.
Correct.
That office does lack the unilateral authority to repeal marijuana prohibition via the stroke of a pen. That authority relies primarily with the 535 members of Congress and sweeping federal changes that will likely only occur when a majority of members from both chambers advance legislation to the president's desk. And
so that's kind of like the fact that the president can actually authorize funding to go towards somebody, but the Congress has to give them spending authority to be able to use that for various projects, correct?
Well, this is why constituents need to continue to pressure their members of Congress to advance this issue and support the legislative efforts to end the federal criminalization of cannabis.
I gotta say, guys, you guys know I'm Mr. Joe Schmo. I just own a head shop. I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about. Can we make things a little bit simpler?
Yeah. Explain it to Jose Sixpack over here.
Listen here, man. All right, so I hear the way our government works, the president can veto shit.
Yeah.
Right. So they made this law that cannabis is illegal and put it on this controlled substance list. President can't just veto the controlled substance list.
So the Controlled Substances Act does not provide a direct role for the president in the classification of controlled substances, nor does Article 2 of the United States Constitution grant the president power in this area. Thus, it appears the president could not directly deschedule or reschedule marijuana by executive order. It was essentially made illegal by a bill in Congress that Nixon signed. And so it's going to take a bill in Congress for Biden to sign. But you can't retroactively veto something from 50 years ago that's already law.
However, it does have a clause in there where the attorney general can actually reschedule or deschedule.
So Cory Booker, senator from New Jersey, and Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, have drafted a letter to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland asking him to initiate the process to decriminalize cannabis. Now, his office has not provided a response yet, but the president in that way does possess the discretion to issue mass pardons and to provide general amnesty to a class of people, such as those with criminal records for federal marijuana violations. And, essentially, the Department of Justice can be directed to exercise this discretion to not prosecute some or all marijuana-related offenses.
So, how the fuck are we going to legalize weed if the president can't veto it? Congress all has to vote on it?
Yeah, we got to get either the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act passed, or we got to get the MORE Act passed. So you have the Senate version, the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, and you have the House version, the MORE Act. We got to get one or both of those bills passed and get that language to match up between the two houses and get it to the president's desk.
Now, we got a third player that popped up this last week. It's a bill that has not been filed yet, but it's still being circulated around in Congress in order to add certain things to it, get like a private markup kind of situation. And that is a bill from a Republican congresswoman who actually has kind of tamp down the process. It's more along the lines of decriminalization as opposed to legalization.
Well, there's no social equity involved in that bill, and that's a big part of the other bills is addressing the fact that the war on drugs has specifically targeted certain communities in this country, has over criminalized those communities. I mean, you hear these stories of like a baby in Miami who had a flashbang grenade go off in their crib because the police had the wrong house that they were trying to raid that they thought was a trap house. So when you think about it, it's like, wow, okay, well, the Cuban American community has been hit hard by this. The African American community has been hit hard by this. You see, even in Tampa, there was a young man. It was a white kid who got murdered by the TPD because they kicked in his door because some crackhead snitch that they had on payroll said he was a major player, and it turns out the guy only had a couple of dime bags. Can't trust crackheads.
Fucked up, man.
You can't trust crackheads. And when I worked in Washington, D.C., I occasionally had to go to various crack houses to find people who had been in contact with somebody who had HIV, in particular needle drug exchange users. And there are a lot of those type of houses in D.C., especially in the Southeast area. And it's got to be a hard situation for any folks over in D.C. to get anything moving along those lines. Of course, they have that situation where the Congress actually controls them. D.C. actually went legal before Congress came back and said, no, you can't do that, which was kind of an interesting situation. And that happened back in the 90s.
So D.C. has an interesting system to where it's a gray market. You have these guys who under I-71 can gift you cannabis. And they'll sell nominal things like stickers and such. There's
I-71. You're talking about a law or like an overpass?
That's a law. That's like an initiative that they passed.
You're like, I gotta hold me under 171 too, man.
But
Suitcase City, right?
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a city council meeting where they were going to raid these shops and try and shut them down. And then at the 11th hour, they decided to pull that part out of there and move forward out of the bill. But, there is a gray market here that's actually thriving in many cases. And these are future, business owners. And what we're seeing is that in the gray market, these folks are trying to set themselves up to be successful. But the truth is, you got the same problem popping up that we have in Florida, where there's a lot of corporate interests that want to corner the market, that have the money to pay for a regulatory structure that's going to price out, your average mom and pop type of shop, your average, small business owner, if you will.
I think we should probably delve into the situation between these two major groups that have major stakes in the cannabis industry, the Suits and the Stoners, which is something that Annie DeFrancesco often talks about. These are two major players, and they're both trying to get as much as they can out of this industry. And it looks like the Suits are kind of winning right now.
The Suits got the money.
And that's the way it is in Florida, too. I mean, if you have the money, then you can get into the business, whether you are actually qualified or not in some cases.
Well, I mean, aren't they going to open up some licenses?
Sometime.
At some point, I think it's like next year. They said that they were going to open up the Pickford license, but it was like going to be like twice as much money to get that one.
And they're not going to have the other licenses ready to be given out until the Pickford license goes out. But there's already currently lawsuits against it, as well as investigations as to why that application fee is twice as high as it was for the original group of white folks that came in and took over.
It's even more than doubled the original price, right?
And compared to Oklahoma, where the application price is $2,500.
$2,500,
and we're $142,000.
I could afford $2,500.
Yeah, but could you afford the infrastructure after that? You have to be able to have both the application fee and something to actually apply with.
Can I sell weed out of Chillum?
You can, but I wouldn't suggest it.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it.
I mean, I'm not saying you had employees that have done it. That's not possible.
It's happened before. Not anymore. We fired all of them though.
Hey, you got to protect your business.
Yeah. But okay, so going back to the whole president can't legalize weed thing. I'm remembering now all these times. Remember Obama came out when he was president and said something about like, I think it's time that we reconsider cannabis being a Schedule 1 drug. And I remember like talking so much shit about Obama because I remember at the time it was like there were like twice as many raids on dispensaries under Obama's administration than George Bush's administration. Not to talk about the president that came after Obama. I really don't know those numbers. But Obama had a lot of people in the industry that were like really pissed off. A lot of liberals in the industry that were like really pissed off at him. And then I remember him coming out and saying that, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You're the president. You have the power to change things, but he really didn't. And I feel like an asshole. And I just wanted to confess that to you guys. I'm sorry, Obama.
Well, one of the expressions I've heard is that the executive branch sets the tone, and the legislation sets the policy. That is basically the way it always works. It used to be back in a century ago that Congress basically only controlled the purse strings, essentially. What taxes were out, what money was coming in. And in fact, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 was actually a monetary policy where you had to pay a fee in order to grow it, and you had to pay a fee in order to buy it, et cetera. And anybody who didn't pay those fees automatically got arrested. And it just went on from there. But it started just basically as an economic policy. And it wasn't even new at that point in time, because they also had before that, even in the Food and Drug Act of 1906, where pharmacists had to sign off on every single little bit of cannabis that was dispensed. They didn't like it because they had to buy a tax stamp with each time that they gave one out. So it was a burdensome process, making folks to feel like the bureaucracy was hurting them.
Wasn't it something like you had to bring your marijuana into a government building to have it inspected for the Marijuana Tax Act?
Yep.
And it's like, if you don't have that stamp, you'd get arrested anyway. So how are you going to get into the building?
And it was hard to get the stamps in the first place, which is one of the reasons it became so illegal. The first person to get arrested, though, was a farmer and not a user.
Oh yeah.
A guy
I think I remember his mugshot. Like, he like seriously looks like a fucking hick farmer.
He does.
No, he looks like Joe Redner.
I'm gonna
less hair.
Find this guy's picture. You guys talk. I'm gonna do research here.
No, I think one of the things that you were talking about, Carlos, was the uptick in federal raids during the Obama administration. I want to point out it wasn't until 2014 when Congress actually passed legislation that prevented the Department of Justice from doing raids in legal states. So the one of the most important things that and I'm seeing some comments here. One person says they think Trump could have got reelected if he had descheduled cannabis in his term in office. The fact of the matter is that what the president decides to push through Congress oftentimes will get pushed. We saw this infrastructure deal that President Biden has been pushing for the past year, and they finally got it done and passed it, and they're going to put it on his desk.
That seems to, even in local government, like I remember, like I'm drawing a similarity here to when DeSantis got flower was smoking legalized for medical marijuana.
Yeah, and he didn't actually do it. He demanded the legislature do it, and they did it.
So that's a similar thing here. Like, you guys are saying, president can't veto anything, but he could like be like, "Yo, you guys better do this shit, or I'm going to throw a fit."
Yeah. And to be honest with you, the last administration was actually doing more to stop legalization as opposed to move it forward. There was actually an office inside the White House that was basically there to scrutinize all state laws to find flaws in them to see if they could take them down.
So everybody, this is Gary's brother.
No.
First guy to get arrested for marijuana.
Take a look at the picture on the right. Give him more hair and a pigtail, and that's Joe Redner. I swear to God.
No, for real.
He has the eyes.
He does look like Redner. Dang.
Y'all funny. I don't see it.
It's all in there. It's all in there.
Was it Sam Caldwell? That's his name.
Yeah, Sam Caldwell.
Yeah.
And Sammy was the first person to get arrested, and he wasn't even a user. He was just a grower. And we still can't grow right now unless you put a lot of money into the kitty, and that kitty being the government kitty right now at this point in time. You got to put in those taxes. And so there again, who's in charge of the industry? Is it the suits or is it the stoners? And who is the beneficiaries of the product?
The suits took over.
The suits have definitely taken over.
The suits took over through the political process.
We're talking about what is a $4.2 billion
Because I mean,
industry.
if you guys were talking about DC becoming a gray area like in the mid '90s, and like really you could trace the industry back to '92 in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, for under influence under city government, not even like city law, but city influence, right? And I'm not gonna go too far into that, but back then it was all about the hippies. Back then it was the hippies that had the balls to break the law, and you needed somebody back then that was willing to do what was right, even when it meant going to jail, even because I mean, a lot of these hippies, like Dennis Perone, did it like the first dispensary, right? He opened it up because his boyfriend had AIDS, and he wanted to provide a better quality of life for other people that had AIDS. So like these guys are just like doing what's fucking right, and they don't care to get arrested. And now that the suits are taking over, we're not really making as much progress as we once were. We're just following the law.
Well, on the positive side, there are some suits who are getting arrested, but mostly it's for monetary fraud,
Like
pump and dump
Beerman,
schemes, that kind of situation.
did Beerman get arrested? Is that what?
No, but speaking of Bierman, Adam is a friend of the shop here, not really, and he was the one who helped found MedMen, who fabulously in New York City when they were working on programs over there came out against home grow, and that led to that South Park show where the folks with integrity were being told to help them stop home grow,
Mhm.
which was a hilarious episode, by the way.
And I mean, they lobbied for that here in
And
Florida.
and
too.
Adam, with all of his enthusiasm and his passion, was also highly greedy. And he actually made it so the executive compensation was in the six figures, and the employees were getting less than minimum wage. And there was also all sorts of employee complaints. And eventually, the investors started noticing that they were really overspending when they shouldn't have, like buying a $10,000 table for a conference room, that kind of thing, or $100,000 table. And eventually, they took Adam out. The board took Adam out. And now MedMen used to have 10 dispensaries here in Florida. They were down to 4 at one point in time because they had to close them down because they owed so much money. And then the Soroyas put in a $100 million backstop of stock. And this other company that bought up Green Gotham's debt to MedMen, which MedMen owed them about $256 million and bought that debt for $165 million. Tilray did. So they're back in business through money from other people, and they're trying to move forward. But I think they were gone from Florida a bit too long. And what I mean by that is, if you haven't seen the ad that MedMen put out this last week, now everybody loves discounts, right? Everybody likes. It used to be if you're lucky, if you get 15% off, 20% off. Now you can see 30%, 40% off. But they put out an ad this week that was kind of, I think, hilarious. It basically says, if you go to MedMen this week and spend your entire allotment in any way, shape, or form and spend at least $500, you are entitled to a 10% discount. Isn't that lovely? I don't think they get exactly where Florida is right now. If they think that anybody wants to spend their entire allotment all in one fell swoop and spend $500 just to get a 10% discount, I think they're a little off base. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah.
I mean, Men is the typical example of the cannabis suits. That's just a stereotypical example.
They have the Apple store of cannabis dispensaries,
and
right?
that definitely scares me when somebody says that like this is the Apple store. Like it's more about appearances than is about distributing the medicine or the product or whatever it is, providing the service. I don't know, man. It's just it's definitely the stoners are no longer in charge. We're along for the ride. If we could be in charge, we would be, but the suits have fucking lobbied the lawmakers, and we're stuck with people like Medman and or True Leaf.
Well, it's interesting what's you talk about that, Carlos, because there's concerns in Virginia. Virginia last week, their House of Delegates and their governor's mansion went to the Republicans. And the newly elected Republican governor Glenn Youngkin has spoken skeptically about marijuana legalization, but his campaign did acknowledge they will not seek to repeal the adult use laws. 68% of Virginians support legalizing marijuana for adult use. Now, the problem now is they were hoping that if the Democrats had held on, their allies in the legislature, Virginia Normal was saying that they were going to have an expedited retail sales and cannabis business licensing coming out next year. But like you said, now with this new Republican governor and and the suits being able to step in, the biggest fear is Virginia is going to create a system like Florida, and that is a major concern for our chapters up there and for folks throughout the DMV.
Kids, remember, don't be Florida. That's really important. Florida has a habit of complicating things.
Well, I saw
Go
a
ahead.
meme. I saw a meme on Facebook that said "Make." It was a red hat and it said "Make America Florida," and I was like, "Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby."
Isn't that DeSantis's bid for president?
I mean, God bless Colby and other folks who had the Floridians for Freedom thing, which was 56 words that basically allowed everybody to utilize the plant in any way, shape, or form. But that is too simple for Florida law. It is just plain too simple. And then to accentuate that, we got a new legalization bill that came up this last week from Representative Humphrey.
Gary, maybe you should make this legalization bill clearer for us.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and throw that in?
Can't hear us with the videos. Now they can hear us. Where'd Cano go? Oh my gosh, Cano died. Cano's no longer with us, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, anyways, so we had a bill that we had a ballot measure which never got any more than like 17,000, I think, petitions or more than that. That a lot of people worked very long and hard on, but they could not get the money together to go ahead and do the big push like what Regulate Florida is doing right now. And it would have been too simple, I think, for Florida to be able to handle, especially as far as legislature is concerned, because they have to come in and create the implementation law for those amendments that come in. And God knows they can tangle things up. So they try to create laws that will create as few tangles as possible. And like I said, Representative Humphrey put out a legalization bill this week. Okay, 432 pages is in this law. That is, for a state law, humongous. In fact, the title itself is 7 pages long. And the title is basically an index of all the things that are in it. So you imagine like a table of contents that's 7 pages long, and you know exactly what we're dealing with as far as that is concerned. And they've got a lot of good things in it, but people will often ask, why does it have to be so complicated? Why does it have to be so convoluted? Why can't we just have legalization and home grow and just say, boom, that's it, we're done?
Why can't the president just veto this?
Because politics is tangled. Because capitalism is tangled. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this brings me to my next topic here. Now, I don't want anybody to think that I'm a communist, because I'm not. But I have read the manifesto of Karl Marx, and he did say that the struggle of class against class is a political struggle. And by that, it means it's always basically the haves versus the have-nots, and whoever is in charge can control the rules. Now, of course, there was a lot of issues with Marx's theories, because it believed in this ideal person that was an altruist that didn't mind the redistribution of wealth across an entire society. We aren't like that. We here in this country especially have a certain attitude of greed, and that is where capitalism comes in, because capitalism is one of the major influencers of the economy when capitalism is in charge. And the whole concept of capitalism is that you have to maximize profits. Mm-hmm. Whereas the whole concept of Marxism in its purest form is to take care of people's essential needs. Mm-hmm. and making people the ultimate goal to help, as opposed to just somebody else's bottom line, because it does create a minority which has a lot of the money and majority that does not. Mm. That is basically the situation we have with capitalism. But we are really working with a capitalist society as far as cannabis is concerned. Mm-hmm. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree on everything you just said. As a matter of fact, I'm a little bit more educated on communism than you may think, there, Gary.
I have a feeling. Well, in fact, I think your family came over here because they didn't quite like the
well,
political structure.
they didn't like Castro's political structure, and I do believe Castro operated under the guise of communism. I really look at Castro as a totalitarian dictator.
Yeah, and Marxism as a whole, as a economic structure, does not have a top-down policy making where you have one person who controls everything. It doesn't really have an authoritarian figure.
Yeah, it's actually more like anarchy than anything else.
Actually, it's more like. Have you ever lived in a commune?
I have not, but I may start one day.
Okay, that's where basically everybody owns everything.
Yeah,
essentially, and so therefore everybody shares equally, and everybody works to make the whole thing work because everybody is responsible for the whole as opposed to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the way it is supposed to work in an ideal society. We had a number of utopian societies that popped up in the 1900s to try to achieve that, but a lot of times they fell apart. Kind of the Walden Pond kind of folks. And it would be great to be able to have that kind of situation where we can have a little bit more egalitarianism when it comes to cannabis is concerned, because a lot of people who need it can't afford it. Plain and simple. I'm sorry, but I cannot afford to go and spend $500 in one fell swoop for my medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And most people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to try to find a way to drive those prices down. But how do you drive a price down when you don't have a free market? And in Florida, we currently do not have a free market. 22 licenses does not create a free market, whereas there are other states that have thousands of licenses.
I think if I could, jump in here, Gary.
Yeah.
I think if we're regulating everything in this market, then why don't we regulate the price?
I mean, because that's considered price fixing, and that's illegal.
Oh. Well, what the fuck?
Just to make things more confusing.
Hold on. Why is price fixing illegal? Because De Beers control 70% of the world diamond supply, and they essentially set the price. So how's price fixing?
Nobody regulates the De Beers.
Let's not
any more than anybody regulated the Rothschilds as far as the banking industry in Europe.
And let's not forget that we're talking about the cannabis industry here. So essentially, it's on a federal level. This whole thing's illegal.
Yeah.
You can't break one more law.
At least for now.
Well, Gary, you pointed out this new bill that Representative Bumfroy has put out, and I'm just blazing through it right now. And one of the things that stands out to me is it allows for 30 grams of legal possession. Like, it has possession limits. So under this bill, 30 grams of cannabis flower will be legal to possess. 500 milligrams of
that's ounce, dudes.
Yes, that's a little bit over an ounce. 500 milligrams of THC contained in an infused product, or 5 grams of concentrate. And those are for Florida residents. If you're not a Florida resident, those are cut in half. So you can have, 15 grams of cannabis flower, 2.5 grams of concentrate, and 250 milligrams contained in a cannabis infused product, which is batshit crazy to me, in a way, because you're saying that if I'm an out-of-state resident, I need to buy the 250 milligram chocolate bar because the 500 milligram chocolate bar is illegal for me to have. That is just, from a consumer point of view, stupid. And I want to know who wrote this 432-page bill, because it wasn't us.
It wasn't.
And I know it wasn't the representative. I'm going to be clear. I know for a fact no representative took how many months to write a 432-page bill. So what?
So you're insinuating the lobbyist wrote this? Is that not true? Not true?
Am I insinuating it? Come on, Gary. I mean, let's be real.
I was being nice. So you are infatuated with the fact that this is a lobbyist bill as opposed to a representative bill.
Now, don't get me wrong. There's some social equity programs in here, so I would not be surprised if one of our allied organizations, like Minorities for Medical Marijuana, had a hand in helping craft this. But if they did, Cheryl, DJ, one of y'all, let us know. Eric, let us know what's up with this, because some of this is cool and some of this is like, I can tell someone who's not like we said earlier, stoners versus suits. It doesn't feel like a stoner had their hands on this bill to the extent it
It
should
sounds like a fucking Suits trying to drive a stoner crazy. Like I'm sitting here quiet this whole time, but I'm like thinking like 5 grams of concentrate. I want fucking 6, dude.
Well, right now, if you have 1 gram of concentrate and it hasn't got a label on it and it's still in a sealed container, you just committed a felony.
Yeah.
For just a single gram of concentrate,
Well,
even a half gram of concentrate.
Here's something else. The department shall issue 75 conditional adult use dispensing organization licenses before May 1st of 2023.
75.
Yeah.
No way in heck can our OMMU actually have the infrastructure or even the wherewithal to be able to knock that out, because they haven't been able to put in 4
Tired of those
in the last 5 years.
I'm tired of that though. Like they're making a demand. They're shortening a supply there. That's all they're doing. We're so overworked. Oh my gosh. You know, we have to charge these black people twice as much for a license because it's so hard the last time we did it for the white people. Like that's, I mean, they're basically saying that their job is so difficult. They want to charge more money. They want to take their time. They don't want to they don't want to do their job. That's essentially what the office said. We need to hire Gary Stein as the head of that department.
I accept that responsibility
Because I think you would be able
you
would be able to. Of course, you need to know how much you're going to get paid first, Gary.
I'm a damn capitalist, for God's sakes. I can't survive on karma.
I'm sorry, but I believe you're a communist now because you just spend all this time talking about Karl Marx, and I didn't really.
Let's talk about Karl Marx for a little bit longer.
But Gary, hold on with the
right.
if you Gary Stein run the Department of Medical Marijuana Use here in Florida, right? And you run it under socialist communist principles, you would be able to get more than fucking 5 licenses a day out. I'm sorry. You would.
Absolutely.
You Gary Stein, not Gary Stein and a team of people.
But not socialist.
You, Gary Stein, would be able to accept the checks, look at the company, right? Look at all the information that the company has provided you. And you would be able to, in a day, at least get 5 licenses out.
Correct.
Okay. So what the fuck is the deal with this fucking Office of Medical Marijuana Use?
Because people in Florida have to make things as complicated as possible. The average application that was put in 2015 had gone anywhere from 800 to 1,100 pages.
The problem is that we don't tax medicine in Florida. So the only way that we're going to get any money out of this is through the licensing process.
Well, let's talk about the licensing process because it's about to be convoluted one more time.
Okay.
We have a situation where, again, we are dealing with the fact that the bourgeoisie, which are the people who have more money, who actually have the ability to influence politicians to do what they ask to do, as in through the lobbyist situation, can actually control it far more than the proletariat, which is our us working folks who try to squeak out a little bit every single day. And so we don't have the ability to change the laws. When the bourgeoisie does, then they can control it in their way. And if their goal is to make the most amount of profit for themselves and for their stockholders, as opposed to doing the best for their patients, then we have issues and problems.
I see what you're doing here, Gary.
You see what I'm doing here?
Bourgeoisie suits.
The bourgeoisie, yeah. The suits versus the stoners. We're talking. That's exactly right. So
I get it.
Listen up, bouge suits.
I'm a proletariat.
We need it. That's right. we need a more egalitarian society when it comes to this, because somebody has to level the playing field and actually consider the needs, the essential needs of the patients out there. And that's what we are basically working very hard to do, especially in regards to the laws that we are working on right now in Tallahassee with the Patient Protection Act and the Employee Protection Act, where we're actually going back to taking care of the patients themselves and not so worried about regulating the hell out of the product, which is exactly what almost all these laws right now are basically doing. And they don't regulate other products like that. I saw the other day a Anheuser-Busch family pack, they call it a family pack, of beer with 99 cans. And as somebody mentioned, there should have been 99 bottles, right? And put them on the wall. But the fact was, you can buy 99 cans of beer, no problem. But you have 29 grams when they say you can't have any more than an ounce, and you're in trouble.
Something the whole family can enjoy.
Something the whole family can enjoy. Bring the kids. We'll put SpongeBob on the beer cans. Let's pass them around.
But you call your weed strain gushers.
Yeah. But here we have a chance, supposedly, to get one minority license through this Pigford Black Farmers Bill, which it starts out, number one, with a very constrained class of people. You have to be in the Pigford class. And at one point in time, you also had to be one of the Black Farmers Association folks.
There's like 7 people that qualify, though.
But
there's like 7 organized. Like I believe I read that somewhere.
Yeah,
but it's like the Pickford people is only so limited within Florida, and the fact that you're charging so much money, a lot of those guys, like there's only 8 people that are affiliated with Pickford in Florida. I'm saying shit you already know.
Well, in fact, I was talking with Senator Brandis about this, and I was complaining about the application fee. And he said, at the end of the day, $142,000 is not going to make a damn bit of difference if these people actually need about $40 million to get their whole process going. And where the heck are they going to get that money? As folks of color who've been beaten down for many, many years, who have not had as profitable of a farm as they would like to have, do they have that kind of liquidity, or do they have access to the capital? And the answer to that, they have access to the capital, but it's not their money. It's OPM, other people's money. And that means that there'll be somebody backing up these folks, and it might look like a minority license in the front, but in the back, you'll see it all whitewashed. Because that's where all the big money is coming from right now. And there are a lot of major funders right now who are not of a minority status, who are not people of color, who are pushing to help these people get their licenses. Well, the first big fight.
Gary, it's interesting that you say this, because I'm reading this HB 549, this bill that you brought up today that legalizes adult use. And I actually want to pick it apart a little bit, because it does go to show that it feels like there is a setup in the grand scheme of things. So in order to get one of these 75 adult use licenses, the Office of Alcoholic Beverages, Marijuana, and Tobacco Use is going to rate these people. So it's not necessarily the Department of Health, and they're going to award up to a 250 point system per application, and they break down in several sections. So I'm on the bottom of page 65 of this 432 page bill, just to get to the scoring section. And looking at the scoring, they're going to award up to 15 points for suitability of an employee training plan. They're going to award 65 points for security and record keeping. They're going to award 65 points for the applicant's business plan, financials, and operating and floor plan. They're going to award 30 points for knowledge and experience. And that says that they have to demonstrate experience and qualifications in business management or experience within the cannabis industry. Now, that clearly does not mean the legacy market. And there's bonus, it says like this includes ensuring optimal safety and accuracy in the dispensing and sale of cannabis. So that means that the existing folks are already going to have, 30 points up on everybody else.
Yeah, basically.
And then, there is status as a social equity applicant. That's up to 50 points. If you meet the social equity applicant part in this chapter. And then you're going to get 5 points for labor employment practices, 5 points for an environmental plan, 5 points if 51% or more of your ownership are Florida residents. 5 points if you're 51% or more of your ownership is veterans. 5 points if you write a diversity plan of not more than 2,500 words to establish a goal of diversity in ownership, management, and employment, and how you treat diverse people.
That's 3 type pages, guys.
The department can also award up to 2 bonus points if you plan to engage with the community. And that is not limited to establishing an incubator program to increase participations of social equity applicants in the cannabis industry, provide financial assistance to substance abuse treatment centers, educate children and teens about the potential harms of cannabis use.
Now, the question is, how much of this has to be written in law? mean, a lot of those things that you just read off right now used to be done as rules and regulations through OMMU when they're given the process to build. They had to create all those rules and then go to workshop, make certain other people have public input and things of that sort. But what Humphrey is doing here is she's putting it hopefully to be codified into law, as opposed to going through the whole rule and regulation development process, which has far more input from the public.
Look, I'm getting to the meat of this. I'm only on page 73, Gary, and I just found something that says, at no time shall the department issue more than 500 adult use dispensary organization licenses. So we found the cap. The cap statewide is 500 adult use licenses.
And that in most states is a low number. I mean, right now we got 103 True Leaves in this state. So you think about, you can't have any more than 5 True Leaves and the state is done as far as the entire adult use market. Will that really allow the market to have full access all across the state? It's a big state with 22 million people here, plus 120 million tourists that could possibly use an adult use market. That's not going to be enough to cover it. They're not going to have enough canopy to be able to even grow that much to have that if they don't build out enough. But I guess the big question here, and I don't know if it's fully addressed in the bill or not, is what exactly is social equity? Because we throw this word around a lot, but a lot of people don't really know exactly what it entails. In part, we talk about the fact that we need to take care of those folks who have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. And people have gone ahead and folded it over to say this is basically a thing of people of color versus people of non-color, as far as who those groups are. But in fact, we have proletariat in all those categories. There is a lot of folks who are of lower and middle class who'd love to get in this business, who'd like to get to make their dream a reality, and yet this says right here, no, you're not going to even be considered, because if you're not a person of color, then you can't possibly even get access to social equity, even if you were somebody like Chris, who got arrested just for trying to take care of his father. Now, if Chris got a license, would it be considered a minority license? That's a good question.
Well, I may be melanin challenged, but but that does not mean that as a Latino, as a Hispanic American, as a Cuban American, I could not necessarily apply for a minority license, especially considering how the Latino and Cuban American community has been hit by the war on drugs, just like the African American community has been hit by the war on drugs. What I have issue with is, after reading through this bill, Gary, it seems like there is existing, MMTCs. It feels like they're the existing suits behind this, because as you pointed out, a lot of things that were taken up in the rules are now being explicitly outlined in statute, which means that someone who went through this process clearly is helping write how the process should look in the future.
Absolutely. And again, anybody who applies for it has to have the fiscal capability to be able to build this up to scale, which is very difficult for people who are coming from a point of we don't have the money. We're the stoners, not the suits. So these suits have to get involved in some shape or form. Now, when we were back there in 2013 working on the entire framework for this whole industry, one of the things that was brought up more than once was that you have to follow the money. You have to see where the money is coming from, because otherwise you will have various parts of the economy, the world economy, coming in to control the market. And that does happen to an extent here in Florida, where people have really no idea where the money is coming from that these people are using to build their infrastructure. And they get a piece here and a piece there as far as finances is concerned, but it doesn't come from one person. It never does. Now, I'm not saying that folks of color should not have their licenses. I definitely, I believe that anybody who can grow should grow and be able to make it regardless of who you are. But these people have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, and so therefore we're concentrating on them. But it is also a class structure too. Folks in the middle and lower class, they just can't afford to get into the industry regardless of what color they are. And what we've offered so far, which is really not really fair, is one black license, one black millionaire out of the 23 licenses that would be there after that one gets done. Is that equity or is that tokenism?
Multi-millionaire. I mean, let's be real. Yeah. It's going to cost $1 million just to get through the process. Not even to have a nursery that grows 400 plants to do all the marketing, to set up the retail establishments, to go through the county level zoning processes and licensing to get your storefront set up. One of the things I'm looking at this bill, Gary, on page 12, it says cannabis business establishment. It defines that as a cultivation center, a craft grower, a processing organization, a dispensing organization, or a transporting organization. And this definition of craft grower means a facility operated by an organization or business that is licensed by the department to cultivate, dry, cure, package cannabis, and perform other necessary activities to make it available for sale at a dispensing organization or use at a processing facility.
So basically a grower and wholesaler.
They got
to call it a craft grower.
A craft grower may contain up to 5,000 square feet of canopy space on its premises for plants in the flowering state. So that's essentially the difference between a craft grower, because currently everything's vertically integrated and they got to be able to grow at least 400,000 plants. Right? A craft grower is someone who obviously can significantly grow a lot less. So here's this too, is that they're creating an licensing structure, which, like you said, Gary, if you can't afford to be the big dog, you can get in as a craft grower, but they're already picking winners and losers in this system,
Yeah, that's the thing about government, especially when they overregulate a market. They do control who are the winners and who are the losers, and that is not a free market. When the government is picking the winners and losers, that's closer to socialism, because at least they're spreading out the wealth between their friends, not exactly the general public. But that is where it stands. And then social equity is supposed to be more than just who owns the licenses too. It's who gives back to the communities who have been affected, and how that money is being given back to those communities. That means if you have a organization that is owned by veterans as a minority license, they should be doing something to help out with homeless veterans or people who can't afford their licenses and things of that sort. That is a social equity program. In essence, that is in line with the people who actually run that particular license. And that's what we had hoped for. But that's not always what we get. And that is the situation. Now, I did create that home grow bill that allows you to create these cultivation centers where people can go there and they can home grow in a container in their own space with expert tutelage, and they can get the best quality stuff that's being grown because they have oversight that allows them to get the best product out there. And the people who run that can use those funds to help out with social equity projects as well. That's one of the things I put in there, as it is a social equity program as well, because just being able to home grow itself is a social equity bill, because most people can't afford it, but they can afford to grow it.
So they're going to allow up to 40 craft growers under this bill by July 1st of 2023.
Yeah. Now, question is, will this bill ever see the light of day as far as a committee is concerned?
No, absolutely not. This bill ain't going nowhere.
So this is a exercise in futility, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and not to disparage the efforts of Representative Onfroy for stepping up to the plate and using one of her bill slots to support this important issue. But when I was meeting with leadership in other offices with some of our other chapters, namely Normal of Florida and Normal of Tallahassee, when they brought up the whole social equity, it was a foreign concept. It was like, what? It's like the leadership in the Florida legislature doesn't even understand what social equity means in the cannabis space, much in the same way they don't understand what critical race theory means when it comes to education. It's just a boogeyman. It's like, what does that mean? It means that Black and brown people should have a little bit more of a step up in getting into the industry, especially since Black and brown communities have been shitted on by the war on drugs. That's what social equity means at its core. And let's be real. The Florida GOP has never been in favor of any type of affirmative action in any type of way. So I don't foresee social equity being something that's going to be a priority. And a 432-page bill, if it's a Democrat putting it out, it's too complicated. But if this was a Republican putting this forward, you might actually see something move on it.
Well, I expect to see something being stuck into the Department of Health bill from Rodriguez. I know there's a couple of things that are already in there, including the fact that he gets to go ahead and sample uh, delivery devices to check for safety, which I thought is good in some aspects because there's a lot of bad cartridges out there. But you would really have to study the safety of a spoon pipe.
Well, what I want to point out
This is
that
my time to shine, guys.
well, Carlos, before we move on, this bill here does nothing to change a lot of the existing penalties that we have in this state. As a matter of fact, I went down here to what fucking page is this? Page 295. And it still does not change the fact that 28 grams or more, but less than 200 grams, is a mandatory minimum prison sentence of 3 years in Florida. So this is not doing anything to change the existing structure that we have.
It's amazing that the government spends more time working on punitive measures as opposed to helpful measures. I mean, if we really want to have social equity, then we should have somebody who could help those people who want to get into the industry to do well. What would be so hard to have folks in the government who can sit down with you and say, all right, this is what you need to do to be successful in your business, and we're going to help you get there. That would be excellent, as opposed to saying, you're going to have to go find somebody who has a lot more money than you do to control your business for you, and whatever they want to do is just fine. Because that's essentially what's going to be happening right now.
Don't you guys just get tired of it though? Like I'm just so sick of it. It's just imagine how surprised we'd be if we came in one Sunday morning and Gary's just like, "Oh man, the people we voted for, they care about the people of Florida. They want to give the people of Florida the opportunity to be a part of this industry."
I had that dream the other night, but then again, I turned into an alligator and I I ate 4 bats for breakfast. But
Jesus, man,
that is just not going to happen. Now there was a equity meeting.
How does that happen? How does that happen though? How do we vote these people in? How do we vote these people that just like don't give a shit?
That's politics. That's politics.
Carlos, I'll tell you two systemic issues we have in Florida. Number one, we don't have runoffs in our primaries. So with our primaries in Florida being winner take all, essentially, if there were like 3 candidates in a race, someone only needs to get 34% of the vote to win. So you don't even need a majority of people to elect someone. And if that's in a district that is slanted to one party or the other, there's not even going to be a general election challenge. So one of the issues in Florida is that we don't have a majority electing people in our primaries. So you get really shitty candidates who just need enough money to fend off the people in their party. And a lot of times the folks who have the most money in the primary are the ones winning. And if that means they have the most money, it also means they have the most donations. And then you got to go look and see who's donating to their campaign. The second thing, again, is that in Florida, businesses can donate to you. In Congress, that's why they have PACs, because businesses legally cannot donate as a business to a candidate. But in Florida, businesses can write you a check, no different than a regular citizen can write you a check.
And they can do it where there's no tracking as well, depending on the structure of the business itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, Carlos, to be real, if you wanted as Chillum to start writing out checks to certain candidates to influence certain elections, you could. Mm-hmm. No different than True Leave is donating money to slimeball elected officials that I can't stand.
Now, 2 Tuesdays ago, we actually had a Senate president actually get ousted from his own seat from somebody who ran against him, who only spent around $175.
Well, that's New Jersey, and anything is possible in New Jersey with enough with enough gumption, right?
Well, he didn't have enough money, but he probably doesn't have enough education, or not education, but necessarily experience to be able to do the job properly. And that brings us to the next point that I have. I mean, it is not enough just to be a minority to be successful in this business. You have to have some kind of tutelage. You have to have some kind of expertise behind you. And I was in Nevada the other day. I was on virtually anyway, and they were having a social equity meeting, trying to work on their policy. And they're saying, well, if a person's grandfather was incarcerated for cannabis, does that mean that the grandsons can go ahead and start a business? They're trying to find any way to go ahead and categorize these things. And you have to have more than just a familial situation in regards to somebody who's been adversely reacted. You have to have expertise. And to be honest with you, a lot of the folks in the legacy market, they have the expertise. And in many cases, they are still have minority status. But will they be able to get to the level where they can actually get a license?
I mean, that's what we were saying about here in DC, is that you have that where these folks are in this gray market building brands for themselves, dealing with customers. Some even have storefronts, some have delivery services. Capitalism is working. What the issue is that, are those folks paying taxes? And that's where this all stems back to, is taxes is what the government wants out of its cannabis system. And that's why you see certain veterans groups going so hard against these federally legal bills that they're pushing, because of the taxing structures. And that's what we're seeing in California right now. That's what we're seeing on the West Coast in other states like Oregon and Washington, is that they're taxing consumers out of the legal market, and folks are going back to the legacy market because they don't want to pay all these taxes, on their medicine.
And let's be certain that the folks who have gotten involved, a lot of times, are silly white folks with money. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. You take a look at the names of the strains that are out there and some of the brands that are out there, you realize that these are not quite adults that are putting this thing together. Like the nerd ropes, what look exactly like nerd ropes you can buy in the supermarket. Or when they have a one called Grandpa's Breath, that's something along those lines. Or some of these bizarre strain names. It doesn't sound like these guys are being serious, just having too much fun.
Well, that's the other thing
I
too,
mean,
Gary.
I think there's a big difference between being informal and being unprofessional. And I think a lot of these guys may be professionals and they may be doing their job correctly, but they're a little informal and they call their strain garlic's breath or something like that. I don't think it's too much to, they get judged a little unfairly because of that. But
I would expect this strain to actually taste like garlic then.
it does.
Does it really?
It's amazing.
Yeah, just I've had garlic's breath. It just depends on and that goes back to it too. Like cannabis strains, and Carlos, you've taught this before. There's the genotype and the phenotype, so you can have the same genetics, but depending on the growing conditions, can produce a plant with different flavor profiles and different colors, and it could still genetically be the same plant as some of these other strains. Now, when it comes to strain names, we're also getting into an area where, for example, Gorilla Glue, you're now having copyright issues with existing products and companies and trademarks that, in a legacy market, that was okay. It's like, hey man, what's that? Oh, this is that Gorilla Glue. This is have you stuck. Right?
Like goddamn Girl Scouts of America.
Yeah, like Girl Scout cookies, Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies, and then Girl Scouts America is like, oh, no, you're going to have to pay up. That's copyright infringement. So, these are all issues that the legal market's going to have to adapt around and deal with moving forward. But I say this much to wrap things up before we move on to Carlos's product review, is that...
Oh, I don't have a...
Oh, just pick a product.
Pick a product, Carlos. Any product. Pick a product. Do one for the dogs. We all love puppies.
I'm gonna do something else. I'll be right back.
Pick your favorite hemp flower.
No, but as Carlos is getting at,
and bring the COA.
Yeah. Looking at businesses moving forward, you're gonna have to be creative. You're gonna have to get people's attention, and you're gonna have to do it in ways that's not going to cost you money with lawsuits. And we're seeing lawsuits from different things. You're seeing lawsuits from existing trademark infringement. You're seeing lawsuits around making something that looks appealing to kids. Like you were saying, Gary, they got Stoner Patch Kids, not Sour Patch Kids, that they sell. And, some people are like, oh, well, that's marketing. Kids can get confused on that. And yes, that's true. There was a kid up in Jacksonville, went to his mom's sock drawer and was like, oh, look, mommy's got Sour Patch Kids. No, mommy's got Stoner Patch Kids in her sock drawer.
Yeah, and chocolate bars, it's called Mr. Goodweed.
Mr. Goodweed.
The exact same color, the exact same font, the whole bit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I mean by unprofessional or at least not mature, because mature folks in the business know that there is such a thing as intellectual property and copyright laws that you have to adhere to, and understand the fact that if the government sees you selling your product to kids and you're not tobacco, They are going to go after you.
and that
They let
definitely
Joe
is
Camel go on
not
for years, you know?
that definitely is unprofessional. I'll agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have that one strain over the West Coast, Skittles with a Z, because that makes it different. And the Wrigley Company, who, by the way, owns Certera, is suing them for copyright infringement for the name because, God forbid, they should have a cannabis that is named like one of their products.
Well, we'll see in the grand scheme of things how that shakes out, because I'll be surprised if Terra starts selling Skittles once they win that lawsuit.
I can see that happening.
So, Carlos, you got a lot of different products there at the shop. You know, a lot of things that folks come in and check out. So, tell us about the product that you got to show off to folks today. As we wrap up.
I have a product that last week Gary Stein said is extremely illegal.
As opposed to partially illegal, yes.
As opposed to partially illegal, but I have some Delta 9 THC hemp gummies here. And you feel like breaking the law, Gary?
Me?
Yeah.
I never break the law. except those 5 times yesterday. But honestly, I don't think that she'll press charges.
So, let's move on now. Delta 9 THC being the component in cannabis, the cannabinoid in cannabis that gets you high. We've seen in the CBD business arise by the whole concept of 0.3% Delta 9 THC, as long as the product has less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC on a dry weight basis.
On a dry weight basis.
Then the product will be illegal.
Now,
legal.
How do you get a gummy with dry weight?
Then, hold on, Gary. Then we started seeing all these different THC products and different cannabinoid products come out. We Delta 8 THC being the big guy, Delta 10 THCO, and Gary's dreaded THCP. But this Delta 9 is a new way of approaching the topic, and I'll just tell you how this is legal. So each gummy weighs 7.35 grams. 7,350 milligrams, and can legally have up to 22 milligrams of Delta 9 THC to be within the legal Delta 9 THC limit of 0.3% with the 2018 Farm Bill.
So basically, it is an eighth in weight.
No, they're also really heavy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very dry gummy, right, Gary?
Yeah, it's well, you say dry weight. I would hate to have a gummy that's totally dried out, because then you'd have like no liquid in it.
A very heavy gummy.
What's the fat content?
Are
they vegetarian? Are they made with pectin or gelatin?
Both. I'm breaking my vegetarianism. There is a vegetarian one coming out. What? There's like nothing in here. 4 grams of sugar, 1 gram of protein, 3 grams of sodium, 26 calories. All right, so
26 calories.
The ingredients are hemp-derived Delta 9 THC, corn syrup, sugar, water, gelatin, citric acid, artificial flavorings, lactic acid, and pectin. And I'm not going to go over the rest because they're horrible dyes.
Lactic acid?
So this is not a natural gummy.
No,
we're getting vegetarian ones in later. We've got the herb gummies over there that are actually vegetarian.
I wish you call them gummies and not soft chews. Do you feel guilty about that?
I can do whatever I want because I'm not regulated by the Office of Medical Marijuana Use.
Isn't that amazing? It sounds like freedom.
Well, after Nikki Fried is out of office, we'll see what happens. You didn't eat your gummy, Gary.
No, not yet.
You're not going to get high.
Not yet.
Okay.
I still got to drive home.
They're delicious.
But
they taste like when I get
cherry.
Home, I will. They taste like cherry. Here, put it back in the bag.
All right. Looks like a peach ring.
They taste like cherries and pina coladas.
Ooh.
And each one has 10 milligrams. That 10 milligrams is not going to do much to me, but it's going to get this guy very stoned.
I'm not as green as you think I am, but I do have at least a little bit of tolerance. I've been using it longer than you've been born.
What?
Whatever that works.
If you don't use it, you lose it, Carrie.
Yeah, I was using it before you were born, when all they had was Mexican brickweed, Thai stick, Acapulco red, Panama red rather, Acapulco gold.
Yes,
yeah.
Gary
My grandmother told me.
My
grandmother told me about that Panama red back in the 70s, Gary.
And
No,
since
that
I wasn't
shit-
living in Florida, I
that
didn't
shit
didn't
was
see Crippy or
dry.
yeah.
You want to talk about a dry weight basis? The shit was dry. Flew in a plane over here, threw it in the ocean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wrapped
You
in
guys,
a garbage bag.
you guys had
The
to
square
do a
groupers,
lot to like smoke shitty weed.
you
I'm
know.
just saying.
Well, it was all
Yeah.
imported then, right? Except for also that was being grown in the public in the national parks and stuff. But yeah, it was coming from Mexico. It was coming from Colombia, basically, and
You know,
being up rather surreptitiously.
it's crazy. You're talking about all this, how like, back in the 70s and 80s, you had to go through so much just to smoke shitty weed. And now we're having, celebrating cannabis festivals with legal MMTCs, here in Florida at the Strawberry Festival Fairgrounds. And I think that's interesting. Coming up this weekend is a big Florida cannabis, the Sunshine State Florida Cannabis Festival.
Great
And
segue.
yeah, at the Florida Strawberry Festival Fairgrounds, you're gonna, hear from local groups and there's artists, there's lectures on cannabis. You'll hear from canna moms, veterans, and you'll see different vendors and out there. So get on out there, check it out. Again, this is progress, and so I think it's interesting that we're getting to a point where you can actually host an event at a legitimate venue like the Strawberry Festival Fairgrounds. I would like to see one day a real, High Times or Cannabis Cup at the Florida State Fairgrounds, where they'll have tents set up with dab rigs available and such. We're gonna get there one day, Florida, but it's not gonna be today.
Now, you guys knew that High Times does have a presence here in Florida. The former acreage license, which was sold to Red, White, and Bloom, is now called HT Medical. HT meaning High Times.
Gary, what do we got to do to get there? Maybe join the movement.
Yeah, you have to join the movement. That's what it's all about. You have to be a part of Suncoast Normal. You have to be a part of the change. In order to do that, we need your talent and your treasure and your time. But at least your treasure.
Just give us your money.
Oh, we'll start out with $25, and
give us your money.
And you'll get this fabulous gold pin because we are the rule makers.
I'm just kidding.
The golden rule. People who have the golden pin make the rules.
You can give us your talent or time too.
Absolutely,
we accept that
because we need folks to come over and tell their story to Tallahassee.
We can't
understand the situation on a human level.
Legitimately, I'm just trying to make up for what I just said here. We can't legitimately ask you for only treasure if we just spent an entire show talking about how stoners don't have money.
Now, my guess is that this is not the first gummy ring you've had a chance to try.
No, it's 200 milligrams of RSO. This is the first gummy ring today.
So in your past experience, how did you think it compared against other soft shoes that we have on the market from MMTCs or like Delta 8 gummies?
They're pretty much the same, just heavier. That's it.
Well, what's the time to onset?
The time, an hour and a half. Hour and a half. It's different per person, Gary.
I could drive to like Gainesville.
That guy was like looking in on here. But yeah, so okay. Gary, let's go. We got to end the show. It's an hour and 7 minutes. We've done everything we need to do.
Yeah. Go to suncoastnormal.org, become a member, and we will take you to Tallahassee with us, and you can help make the rules.
Are you going to Gainesville? Is that what you're trying to say?
If I take one of those things, I want to time it properly. Yeah.
Take it. I have some THCO gummies for next week.
Okay.